Shalom. In this video, we are going to join a Windows 10 system to a Windows Active Directory domain running on Windows Server 2019. We'll do this in VirtualBox using a VirtualBox environment. Right now we have Windows Server 2019 running. This one is already a domain controller, and we have this set up in VirtualBox. So we're going to download an evaluation copy of Windows 10 Enterprise and add it to VirtualBox, and then we'll add it to the same network, the same NAT network right here, testnet, so it can see the 2019 domain controller. Then we'll join the Windows 10 system to the domain that's running on that domain controller. And once we're done with that, we'll do a couple of tests with group policy. So those are the objectives. So the first thing we need to do, since we already have 2019 running, and I'll put a link beneath the video on where to get 2019. It's on the same page here, though. The first thing we need to do is download Windows 10 Enterprise. And sorry, let's do a search for Windows 10 Enterprise evaluation. Unfortunately, you can't download, and this is where we want to go, Eval Center. Unfortunately, you can't download or evaluate Windows 10 Professional, at least not that I found. So we are going to do Enterprise here, the first one. You can make up a name here. It doesn't really matter. They don't check anything, at least from what I'm aware of. I always make up bogus names. We're going to download the English version, or you can download whatever version works for you, 64-bit. Now it's downloading. It's about 4.3 gigs, so that'll take a little bit of time. When that's finished, we'll come back and complete the installation. While that's going, though, we're going to get the environment ready. So let's go back to VirtualBox. And VirtualBox, we have to get the environment set up, and then once the ISO is completed, we'll do the install. So let's go to Tools. We're going to do a new virtual machine. We'll call this Windows 10 Enterprise. This is just the name of it. VirtualBox tries to determine what version you're running and what operating system. So it thinks we're running Windows just because we titled it Windows, which is correct, but we're not running Windows NT. So let's scroll down. Let's find Windows 10 64-bit. That's fine. That basically just sets up a few things in advance, such as the RAM, 2 gig, that's fine. We're going to create a virtual hard disk now, that's fine. We'll use the VDI image for VirtualBox, that's fine. And we're going to dynamically allocate the space, which saves space, but it's a little bit slower than fixed size. For the name of the hard drive, we'll call it Windows 10 Enterprise. We'll put it in this folder. I've got all my VMs in a VMs folder on the D drive of my system. And this will be under the Windows 10 Enterprise. The hard drive will be called the virtual hard drive, Windows 10 Enterprise.vdi. 50 gig is okay, create that. And now we've got it all set up. So the next thing to do is start this when the ISO is completed downloading, and then we'll point this machine, this virtual machine, to the ISO so we can install Windows 10 Enterprise. One thing I'm going to change already is the NAT network, so it will be on the same network as the server 2019, which is on testnet, which is a 192.168.1/24 network. So go here, go to settings, go to network, change this to NAT network, testnet. That's okay. So now we have the environment set up. We're ready to go as soon as the ISO completes downloading. Okay, the ISO has finished downloading, so let's start the VM. We will point to the ISO right here, so select startup disk. We're not going to select an existing ISO. We're going to point to the new one, which is in the downloads directory on this system. So downloads, and it should be this one right here. It'll have client Enterprise right there. Start that, and now the virtual machine we set up is booting, and it is booting off of the ISO we just basically mounted. So this will take a little bit of time to come up, and we'll walk through the screen here. English is fine. Install now. Accept the agreement. Custom install. We're not doing an update. The default drive is fine for this test. This part here may take a while when it gets to these steps, so we'll pause the video and come back when that's finished. Okay, it looks like it's finally finished installing here. Turn that off. So it's going to take a while to set up. United States is where I am, so I'm going to select United States for the region. Again, just right now we're setting up Windows 10 Enterprise within VirtualBox. And keyboard layout, I just went to scaled mode so you can see a little bit easier. Keyboard layout is US here. Language, let's go down. We don't have a second keyboard. Let me turn this garbage off. So let's go back here. I think I accidentally set a second keyboard. Skip that. Enterprise is a little bit unfortunate, but we can go down here to domain join instead, because we are going to join that domain we set up on the Windows Server 2019 system. So let's say who's going to use this PC. We'll say Grumpy Cat. Grumpy Cat. Our password for Grumpy Cat will make a very secure password up. Confirm it. Security questions. There we go. What's her pet's first name? We'll just put none for all these. 2, childhood nickname, none. We could easily be socially engineered to give these up. Some of those Facebook questionnaires that go around are ploys to get people to give up their answers to these sort of questions. Hell no, we do not want to make Cortana a personal assistant. I mean, come on. So we're going to say no here. Our objective is to just get this installed. We're not going to do online speech recognition. We're going to turn off a lot of this stuff. I don't like to have things enabled that I don't need. So I usually turn off just about everything. Scroll down here. I think we got most everything turned off. Well, almost come up. So now the next step is to join this to the domain. Let's go to settings here. System, about, and we'll go to system info here under related settings. Right now we are part of a work group. Again, this is the name of the computer. So we want to change these settings and make this computer part of the domain we set up. So here we're going to click on change. We'll leave the name the same, but we're going to join a domain. The domain we have set up is I love cats. That is what is running down here on the 2016 machine. We can look at the, or 2019, I'm sorry. We can validate that real quick. Active Directory users and computers. And we'll see that this is part of the ilovecats.local is the domain name actually, but the NetBIOS domain name is ilovecats. And we can look at what computers are part of the domain right now. So there are no computers part of the domain. So let's, and again, the domain is ilovecats.local. So let's go back to Windows 10, ilovecats. We could do .local as well. It should look for the domain. So So it could not be contacted. So let's try just I love cats here. Sorry about that. I love cats. So to join the domain, I need to have use an account that has administrative privileges or the ability to add computers to the domain. So I'm going to use little bub, which is an administrator currently. And it'll take a second to join the domain, and then it should ask us to reboot. We'll give it a couple seconds here. So we got an error here, and the error is because this system is set up to use DHCP, and I intentionally left this in here. So let's walk through this real quick. So it's set up to use DHCP, but it's pulling an IP address from VirtualBox. So what we need to do is change the DNS setting to point to our domain controller's DNS. We're on the same subnet, so that should be okay. But if we just validate the DNS settings, this one is using 1.1.1.1 and 10.1.1.1, which is not correct. So we want this to use the DNS settings for the domain controller so it can actually find the domain. Because on 1.1.1.1, ilovecast.local does not exist. So let's change these two settings. We want these to point to the IP address for DNS. We can just change the first one. We want that to point to the IP address for the Windows Server 2019, which is right here. So this machine, as we saw earlier, is 1.6. So we need to change this one to point to 1.6. So let's do that. Let's look at the network settings. And we will change the adapter options. Right click on this, properties, and we'll go to IPv4. We'll say DNS is 192.168.1.6. 1.6 should be correct. Let me just validate that. 1.6, yep. So that should fix it. Click on OK. Now if we look at our setting again here, ipconfig/all, we should be using 1.6. So now when we try to discover ilovecats.local, it will point to 1.6 for DNS, so it should be able to discover that. ilovecats.local. Okay. Ask us again, little bub. Password. And hopefully this time it discovers the domain. If it doesn't, there's a bigger issue going on. Alright, welcome to ilovecats.local domain. Perfect. So we have to restart. You have to restart Windows with pretty much when you do everything. So we'll go ahead and restart now. And when this comes back up, we'll check out a couple things. Alright, it's finally rebooted, so now this computer should be part of the ilovecats domain. So let's log on as Grumpy Cat here. This is the local admin account we created when we first set up Windows 10 Enterprise. Alright, looks like it finally logged on. Let's double check the settings here, make sure we are part of a domain. And then we'll go to the Windows 2019 server to see that this system should now be part of the domain over there. So let's just validate here real quick. System. Let's scroll down to About. And we'll look at the system info. Looks like it is part of ilovecats.local, which is great. So now let's go to the Windows Server 2019. We'll go to Active Directory. Go ahead and close the PowerShell here. So under the computers, I just hit F5 to refresh. we've got that computer which is part of this domain. So we did add the computer to the domain. Now we want to do a couple things here. First off, we have an account on the domain for Littlebub right here. So Littlebub is a user and a domain admin. So Littlebub should be able to log on to that other computer that we just added to the domain, the Windows 10 computer. So let's log off the other computer and log off the Windows 10 computer, and we'll log on as Littlebub. So Littlebub does not have an account on this local system. It just has a domain admin account, and we can check that by looking at the accounts on this system. So let's go here and look at the accounts. So we have Grumpy Cat is the only local account it looks like we have. We can also do this with computer management, which I prefer than the other way. Okay, computer management finally came up, so let's go to local users and groups. And you notice we do not see Littlebub, all we see is Grumpy Cat. That's the only account actually enabled. These little drop down arrows mean these accounts are disabled. So Grumpy Cat, which is the local admin account, is the only account enabled. But since we joined this to the domain, we should be able to log on with any domain accounts to the system. If we go to groups and we'll look at our groups here, these are our local groups. If we look at administrators, you notice domain admins from the domain is now part of the local administrators group. So this domain admin group, anyone in that group can log on to this computer. Let's take a look at users. Same concept with users, the local users group. Any user in the domain now, I Love Cats, can log on to this system, because when we added it to the domain, it put these global groups into these local groups. So to validate that, and as we just looked, there is no account here for Littlebub, but Littlebub is part of the domain, so I should be able to sign out. And then I'll sign in as Littlebub using the domain account for Littlebub. We'll use a different user, Littlebub, and you see right here it defaults to sign into I Love Cats. So now it looks like it's working. We're logging in as Littlebub to this computer by using a domain account. So this proves that the global group from the domain that was added to this local group, and that process is actually working.